Unrecord's lead dev and CEO is in a popular French rap group named after an American school shooting. With depictions of the events in the music videos, copaganda, Unrecord will be a great way to make mass shooters. Okay, we need to talk about this. Unless you've been living under a rock, like a Wi-Fi-less, no access to Twitter, YouTube rock, you've already seen the crazy new gameplay footage unveiled by Unrecord, indie dev studio Drama's first crack at making a game. And I have no problem saying that it is the most photorealistic FPS game that I've ever seen in my life, being developed in Unreal Engine 5. And just a few short days into the hype, there's already big controversy from multiple angles. The most outlandish one that I've seen is that Unrecord is copaganda, as in cop propaganda. Unrecord looks really cool, but I have absolutely no interest in paying for photorealistic copaganda. From what I read, it sounds like some, oh, but you can choose to be a good cop garbage. It's a crime to not make a horror SCP game in this style and instead do a thin blue line jerk-off fantasy. Now guys, look, in Unrecord, you do play as a cop. Your POV is from his body cam, presumably on a raid in some drug house or something like that. But I'm not seeing the part in this short bit of gameplay that we got that fetishizes cops. For years, we play Call of Duty and kill people from the Middle East. Radio silence about being an American Special Forces propaganda. Nada. Is it really that big of a deal to play as a cop? Now, I really don't want to cross over the line into politics because I think you're all sheep. Whether you're fantasizing about getting pegged by Rachel Maddow or sucking Tucker Carlson's toes dry, I'm just not with it. Regardless of what you follow, playing as a cop as the main character in a video game is not making any statement about anything. It's just storyboard. In fact, in my opinion, there's actually a lot that they could do with this to maybe bring more nuance to the subject. There isn't much information out right now on how the actual game and story will play, but at the end of the trailer, we do get a short scene that shows fast-paced decision-making is going to be a factor.
Where the fuck is Oscar?
With such photorealistic ambience, it might place us in some really difficult positions that most of us have never been in. I probably shouldn't say this, but my dad was a cop in the 90s. He probably would be upset with me sharing this encounter, but it's been on my mind the whole time that I've been writing this video, and he's too old to watch YouTube, so. He got called to a domestic violence situation where a mom was arguing with a stepfather about him basically molesting her daughter. They ended up taking him out in handcuffs, and before he put the guy into the car, he whispered into my dad's ear and said, "The bitch wanted it." He says he saw red after that. He slammed his head onto the car or the roof and messed up his face pretty bad. When he took him to jail, he made sure that his cellmates knew that he was a pedo. And they responded, "Don't worry, we'll take good care of him in here." That was honestly when I first learned that inmates are the same too. They're just people. They looked at the stepfather the same way that my dad did. And he made sure that I understood that. Shortly after, he was obviously asked to resign because you can't do that to somebody in handcuffs. He knew there would be consequence, but the point is, what would you have done in that situation? I'd like to think that I'd have a calm head in any encounter, but I don't really know. There's terrible cops that have done terrible things. That's a fact. You can't deny it. But that doesn't mean we can't play a game as a cop without being pro or anti-police. Not to mention, the devs have already clearly stated their stance, and they're not even American. So, not to mention, the devs have already clearly stated their stance. As a French studio addressing a global audience, the game does not engage in any foreign policy and is not inspired by any real-life events. The game will obviously avoid any undesirable topics, such as discrimination, racism, violence against women and minorities. The game will have no biased or Manichaean take on criminal acts and police violence. We also respect and understand people who may feel disturbed by the game's images. Art cannot fight against interpretation. Honestly, the key phrase is art cannot fight against interpretation. I love that. Lots of games over the last few years have felt a bit preachy. It's good to see a dev team out there that is making their game in a way that allows us to interpret what it is. Still, even with such sentiment, there's going to be people that push their interpretation as the actual intentions of the devs. And speaking of intentions of the devs, another controversy that just started floating around this game is that head of the drama studio and Unrecord CEO Theo Hirabarn, positive I'm not saying that right, is a former member of a popular French rap group named Columbine. The group is named after the notorious 1999 Columbine school shooting here in the United States. The name Columbine has already been confirmed by members of the group to be taken from the tragic school shooting that took place in Colorado more than 20 20 years ago. And their debut album, Clubbing for Columbine, is even named after the popular Michael Moore documentary, Bowling for Columbine. But before Twitter goes off its rocker on this one, the group made it clear that their name wasn't a mockery or exploitation of the mass shooting, but more an ode to adolescence, as they describe it. A reflection on the tragedies that come with being young, which that I can completely respect. Some of us would like to assume that it's in poor taste, but what's interesting is this kind of ties into the first narrative being pushed on Twitter about copaganda. I think Theo, the CEO, really just has an eye for controversial content, and it could end up paying off for them. It definitely gets eyeballs, as in just a week they've gained 600,000 wish lists on Steam. That's a lot. Now, the biggest problem and complaint that has any kind of merit at all was first tweeted out by Trainwreck TV, the co-founder of Kick, the new streaming platform competing with Twitch. He says, "I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but this level of realism in video games should be heavily moderated in shooters for anyone under a certain age. I hope parents do their job. This level of realism for shooting and killing makes me feel uncomfortable, as if I'm watching a real leak from a military or police operation. The clear distinction between real and fake is necessary, but this level of realism, in my opinion, gives real credibility to the nonsense politicians have been spewing for years about video games conditioning young people to lose a sense of empathy toward violent tendencies or situations." And I've seen some other big streamers like Modern Warzone even agreeing with him on this statement. Now, I do too. I agree, because we're not talking about Mortal Kombat, which politicians tried to ban in the 90s for being too violent and corrupting the youth. This game is almost indistinguishable from reality, but that's where I differ from Trainwreck. Almost. Anybody that can play Unrecord and understand the controls can recognize that this is on a screen. You're not really there. While parents really should monitor their kids in whatever it is that they're playing, that's really all they can do to stop a child from playing it without adding some weird new law. Now, what I'll be more worried about is when games become literally indistinguishable from reality, which at some point is going to happen. You don't think in 30 years per se, we won't be playing games like Ready Player One with metaverses that we literally upload an avatar copy of ourselves into? That will be when I'm actually worried about the mental health of our children in video games. Like, have you seen Black Mirror? But what are y'all's thoughts on Unrecord? I still see people out there saying that it's fake, even after the dev posted an actual screen recording from the Unreal editor. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Then consider subscribing if you haven't already, so that you can stay up to date with news on this game, as well as some of the other upcoming extraction shooters I've been talking about, including this one right here that's horror based. It's kind of like if Escape from Tarkov met up with Left 4 Dead. Very weird concept. Check it out.